Hey everyone. It's been, I don't think I've made a video for you since the first week here, and I thought that this week being sort of the last week before the exam, I would take some time and make a video for you and kind of walk through an example free response question from a prior AP exam. And I think this is a good one I've picked out because I think it's pretty close to the type of question that you're going to see on this year's exam, even with the sort of kind of slimmed down version that you're going to see. I think this question hits all the right kind of keys. Um, so I opened this up, and forgive me because I've never really used this application before called Cami, but I'm basically going to use it to highlight text and just I want to be able to show you how I would read through a question like this and kind of understand it and put it together and then answer it. So here, and mostly because these free response questions that the AP College Board sends out, they can be confusing to read. They can have a lot of text, and it can be hard to understand like what even you're being asked to do. A lot of the times, the solutions end up only being maybe 4 or 5 lines of code for each part, but understanding what you're even being asked to do is like half the battle. Um, and then, like I posted in Classroom, or I will post in Classroom. So I'm going to walk through this question, and I'm going to feel free to, I'll pause the video, I'll pause it, and you can try it yourselves. And then I'll try to give my solution to it. And then this is kind of just like a walkthrough of how I would read one of these questions. And then later I'll post a couple more, another couple of free response questions for you to try on your own. And I think they're going to be similar to this. So anyway, long ado. Let me make this a little bit bigger first. Um, so what I want, maybe that's good. Okay, so this is from the 2013 exam. So in its question one, there were 4 questions on the exam, and students were given an hour and 45 minutes to do them. So that comes out to roughly, I think, 30, I think, 35 minutes per question, something like that. And now keep in mind, you're going to have 2 questions. The first one is you're going to have 25 minutes to answer, and then 5 minutes to submit your work through their online portal. So it might be shorter than this. But let me go through this first. So here's question one from the 2013 exam. A music website keeps track of downloaded music. For each download, the site uses a download info object to store a song's title and the number of times it has been downloaded. A partial declaration for the download info class is shown below. So I'm just going to pause real quick. The first thing I would do is read through the question almost entirely. Take the first, I even want to say like 5 minutes of your time and read through the question so you understand what's going on here. And it might take you a couple of times, depending on how quickly you kind of absorb this information. But basically, what's the idea with this code here? So it's a music website, right? They're keeping track of downloaded music. They're storing the downloads in this download info. Maybe I can mark this up now. This download info class, this object, right? Now, what's in a download info object? There is something to store a song's title, right? And something to store the number of times it has been downloaded. So there's 2 parameters here, 2 fields. Let's see. And they don't show you a whole lot, right? there's a constructor here, public download info, string title. There's no implementation, and then there's a public string get title. So that's a get method, right? An accessor method to get the title, sans title, and a public void increment times downloaded that says above it increments the number of times downloaded by 1. So interesting. So there's a method for each of these objects to return the title and increment the number of times downloaded by 1. So this is important, and they kind of highlight this in gray. These are important methods for you to know because you might want to call them later in the question, right? You might want to call get title. You might want to call increment times downloaded for this download info class. Okay, let's go on because there's nothing here. They're not asking us to do anything, right? But again, I'm just saying, like, I've conceptually I've understood what is going on with this object now, and what the point of it is. It's a way that they're storing information about downloaded music. What's next? The list of downloaded information is stored in a music downloads object. A partial declaration for the music downloads class is shown below. By the way, if you want to, you can use this website Cami as well, I believe, to kind of like highlight text. It's super helpful to you to do something like this. It would be nice if you could kind of print, and I think you can for this series exam. If you have a printer, it might take extra time though. You could print stuff out and highlight it physically, but having some kind of way to highlight the text on the question is useful. So let's see, the list of downloaded information is stored in a music downloads object. So here's the music downloads object, right? Or class. It has a list of download info. So if you remember now, this download info object is from this class right here, this declaration. So it's got a list, like an array list of objects of that class. And the list is called download list. That's the name of the list. So it's a list of these music download objects, these download info, right? And again, this is confusing because their names are very similar, right? Like download info, download list. Like, whoa, what's going on here? But you get the idea. So here's a constructor for this music downloads object. Just creates, it says download list, the private list, the field that it has, equals new array list, download info, sure. And it has some methods. And you can read this stuff if you want above the method. It'll always tell you what it's supposed to do. So like this, returns a reference to the download info object with the requested title if it exists. So this method is called getDownloadInfo. It takes a string title as its argument, as its parameter. And that's going to be implemented in part A. So that's going to be part A, is implementing this method getDownloadInfo for a string title. And actually, I might skip part B for now. I might read this later because I can see here it says to be implemented in part B. I might completely skip this method. I don't need to know anything about it to answer part A, right? So I'm going to try to jump straight to part A. What am I going to do? Here's part A. Write the music downloads method getDownloadInfo. So that's the one that I just looked at up here, getDownloadInfo. It takes the title as its parameter, which returns a reference to a download info object. Remember, that's the object that stores each music download. So it returns a reference to that object if an object with a title that matches the parameter title in here exists in the download list, right? That's the private list. That's the private list that's in this music downloads object. If no song in download list has a title that matches, it returns a null object. So for example, and they always give you examples like this. Suppose variable web music A refers to an instance of music downloads. So the list is called, or the music downloads object is called web music A, and that the table below represents the contents of download list. So here's the download list, right? It's got 3 things in its list, and each thing is a download info object that has a song name, a title, and a number of times downloaded. The object of position 0 is Hey Jude, download count of 5. Object of position 1 is Soul Sister, and it's got a download count of 3. So was that Train? Oh man, okay. All right, and the next one is Aqualun. I'm not sure if I know that song. With a download count of 10. The call webmusicday.getDownloadInfo Aqualun, right, returns a reference to this object, this download info object. If we call webmusica.getDownloadInfo happy birthday, we get returns null because there are no download info objects with that title. Okay, so I think I have an idea what I'm doing here. Like I've conceptualized what the question is going to be asking me, right? We're going to be writing this getDownloadInfo method that returns one of these objects or returns null. So you might be thinking, okay, now you can start planning out what are we going to do to write this code? Because this next page, and I skipped some stuff down here, this is kind of just repeated information. This next page is where you're going to actually just write your code. Now for the exam this year, I think what's going to happen is I would probably copy all of this, like the header, into a Google Doc. Actually, maybe I will do that right now. Let me open a Google Doc. Here's how I would, if I were you guys. Because what you're going to do is you're going to write it in a Google Doc and then paste it into their like portal, whatever they're going to do. So I would just start like a blank Google Doc. There were a couple things that they asked you to do. They wanted you to put your AP ID at the top along with your initials. So you might even want to just have these set up in a folder somewhere instead of starting a blank one, right? Like you need your 8-digit AP ID up at the top, followed by your initials. So for me, like SD. That was one of the requirements. They said no matter how you're submitting your work, I prefer Cohen, Mr. Cohen, if you know him. He's gotten me on this Georgia font, so I'm all about the Georgia font right now. Oops. It's a little bit slow with me kind of recording as I go. That's fine. But yeah, so you might want to have like some documents set up already for like, I don't know, part A or something like that. AP, CSA, FRQ 1, part A or something like that. You might want to have this set up just so you don't have to do it during test day, during that time that you've got. So anyway, assume that I've got this set up. What I would do is I would say, here's part A, right? Complete this method. I would put all of this into the Google Doc. That way I'm going to know where I'm going to be typing here, and then I'm going to copy all of this and paste it into their portal. But yeah, so we're going to fill in the method that returns a reference to the download info object. Let me go back here. Right, here's the summary. Returns a reference to one of these download info objects if the title matches whatever the string that is put in, right? So you can think, and there's a list, right? In the list, it's important that you know the name of the list. It's called download list, right? Download list. That was in here. That's the name of the list in this music downloads object or class. So you might be thinking now, let's plan it out. How are we going to do this, right? We're going to get some string, and we're going to have to compare it to each of the things in the list. So you should be thinking right away, we're going to need a loop, a for loop, either one of two kinds, either a regular for loop, right, where we go through the index of the list, of this download list, or you could in this case do a for each loop. I'll keep things simple. I'll do a regular for loop. So what is that going to look like? We're going to try to loop through this download list, right? And by the way, if you want to, I'll pause the video now. I'm just trying to give you guys like an idea of how I would go about doing this. So if you want to, and I put in here, by the way, there were some, after this section, I think there was a page from Adhesive that I pasted in here where they go through kind of the same tips and strategy. So like understand the different classes and what they do and what can they contain. Understand what the task is. The task is to implement this get download info method that searches through download list for a download info object with the given title. And now we can make a plan, loop through the download list, right? You should be thinking of for loop. You should be thinking that in your for loop, you're going to compare the title that's in the method, right? String title, to the title of each of these download info objects. Oh, by the way, how could you get the title for each of these download info objects? If we go back to where the download info class is, there is a method called getTitle. That is super important. You calling that method alone was probably going to give you a point out of the like 5 points or whatever that this is going to have in it, right? So that's our plan, right? And it's important to plan. And if the loop finishes and there's no, if we don't find a thing with the given title, we're going to return it null. So how do I go about doing this? If you want to, pause the video now, try it on your own. I'll put up this little pause screen, because why not? Pause the video now and then come back and compare to what I've written or what I'm about to write. Right? Okay, so hopefully maybe you've tried it on your own. Regardless of whether or not you did, totally fine. So here's where I'm gonna try to write this code myself. So I know a few things. I know I need to write a for loop. Don't do this to me. Okay, there we go. Some people like to tab, some people like spaces. I'm a tab guy. So I'm going to write this for loop for int I equals 0, right? Until, or as long as I is less than or equal to, now what was the name of this list? It was called download list, right? This list of objects is called download list. So I'm going to write download list. Yep. It's important to get your abbreviation, your capitalizations right too. Dot, now it's an array list, so it's dot size, right? -1. That's the, well, I guess it depends. As long as it's less than or equal to, then you're going to need a -1 in there. If you simply wrote less than, then you don't need that -1. Let's just kind of think about the size of the array list. Like here's 3. right? If there's 0, 1, and 2 are the index, that means there's 3 objects in here. So the size of the list is 3, so you want to go up to and including that minus 1. So the index is going to go 0, 1, 2. So this is just very typical for loop stuff. I++, right? Here's everyone's favorite for loop. Now what are we going to do as we loop through? Now I is our index, right? So we're going to compare the title that we were given, right? In the method, we want to compare string title. So we want to say like if, oh, come on, if title, which is a string. Now remember, I don't want to do equals, because it's a string, and when we're comparing strings, we want the dot equals method, right? Dot equals. So if title dot equals, what do we want to compare it to? We want to compare it to the download info object's title, which we have to use the get title method. So let's see here. So I want to do, so I'm at download list dot get, remember because it's an array list, get I. That's going to give me the object at the ith position dot get title. I'm going to call that object, that download info object, its title. And I'm going to compare that to the title in our parameter here. So if it equals that, you know what I need? I need some kind of thing. What am I going to return at the end, right? At the end of this, I need to return what does this method do? It returns a download info object, a reference to that object. So I need to return some kind of one of these objects. But I could, you know what I could do? I could just do return in here. So if it finds it, I'll return download list dot get I. I'm just going to return that object. I found it already, right? And some people always like to put extra things in here. Indentation is very important. So if I find an object in that list where the title is matching the title that I'm given, just return that object. Return download list dot get I, right? And otherwise, I mean, I could just end the for loop right here and say, okay, I've gone through the whole thing. If it gets to this, if it returns something, then it'll exit the method right away. I'm good, right? I'm done, right? Done. Method complete, right? If it gets to the end of the for loop and it hasn't found it yet, then that's where I'm going to return this null as my return then. And that's fine. So there you go. That's part A, right? I think I'm done. I'll check later. I think Adhesive put some sample code in there, but I think I'm done. How many lines of code is it? It's like 1, 2, 3, really 4 lines of code is all it took. But understanding the question was the important part first. Okay, so this is part A, right? And in fact, maybe I would just put part A. I think they're going to want you to put part A and no, they're going to be separate. They're going to be separate uploads. So I would have a part A, and then I would do a part B as well. But you could, for your own sake, you know what you could do, and you could submit part A, and you could submit part B like this. This is part A. Right? You could just, for your own sake, put it in one document, and then next we'll look at part B. I'll put the same header in here of my whatever my AP ID is and whatever this is. By the way, you need to know what your AP ID is before you even get started. I'll put something in there in Google Classroom about that. Basically, you can check in myap.org or whatever it is. There's a good thing about getting ready for exam day. I'll send this link out separately. Or something, maybe not this one, but there was something about like 5 steps to getting ready. One of which is confirming your email address and some other things. So anyway, you need to know what this 8-digit AP ID is. I think it's 8 digits. Okay, what's part B? Let me go back here and we'll look at part B. By the way, I could move this if I wanted to. Look, how does my code compare to adhesives? Adhesive gives me some code here too. Oh, they did it a little bit differently. They used a for each loop. Totally fine too, but basically it's the same thing. It's a for loop with an if statement in the middle. And return null at the end. Okay, so now let's look at part B. Part B says, write the music downloads method, update downloads. So I skipped this method when I first was reading the question. I actually skipped this because I said, okay, there's when we implemented in part A. What's part B? It's update downloads. So here's the header for it, right? Update downloads. It's going to take a list of strings called titles. Okay, let me read part B. Write the music downloads method, update downloads, which takes a list of song titles as a parameter. For each title in the list, the method updates download list either by increasing the download count if a download info object with the same title exists, or by adding a new object, download info object, with that title and a download count of 1 to the end of the list. Okay. When a new object is added to the end, the order of the already entries remains unchanged. Well, I know exactly what this means. So that's, adding something new to the list, we know what that is. That's an array list method called .add, right? Easy enough. The first part of this is kind of tricky though. So we're going to have a list of song titles as our parameter. And for each title in that list, we're going to increment the download count. Now there was a method for that too, right? There was a method for that in my original download info thing that I could use. There's a download info. It was called increment times downloaded. And even though I don't have any code for it, I think that's just like before when we needed to use get title. Now I'm going to have to call this method increment times downloaded to increment that number in the download info object. Increment times downloaded. Okay. Where am I? Okay, so for example, let's say this was our download list, right? That's the name still. Let's say this was our download list like before. When we call webmusicb.update downloads song titles with this as our list of song titles, results in the following download list with incremented download counts. Okay, so what's going on here? So we're taking this list of titles and we're incrementing the counts if those titles are already in the list. And if they're not already in the list, we add it to the list. Right? I'm just thinking through this here. So for example, the first thing is lights. Now lights isn't in the list, so it's going to get added with a thing of 1. I'm just wondering now, if I just add it to the list, string title, I'm going to probably have to use the constructor if I have to add a new version to the list. Yeah, sets the number of times downloaded to 1. I can't just add a title to the end of this list. It has to be in download info object. So it's a little bit tricky. Part B is always a little bit trickier. Some things to consider if you really want to get it right. You don't have to get it fully right to get full credit. I mean, to get like a 5 on the exam, right? You just have to get enough of it right. But I'm going to try to do this. So lights gets added to the list, which means we're going to have to add a new download info object to the end of the list. Aqualung will then just increment this object Aqualung by 1, so that goes up to 11. Soul Sister will increment Soul Sister from 3 up to 4. Happens again later, so then it goes up to 5. Go Now gets added to the list. Lights, which was added here, then gets incremented by 1. So basically, this is tricky. So basically, we've got this list of titles. We're going to have to use a for loop. You've got to start thinking already. I'm going to use a for loop to go through this list of titles, compare it to the download list, so see if that thing's on there. Oh, you know what? We can use part A. We can use part A, which was get download info. It takes a title, and it gave us the download info object that was already in the list, or null. So we're going to have to use part A for part B. Let me say that again. We can use the get download info method that we wrote for part A to get the object that matched the title, right? So we're going to call it on each of these titles in this list and see if it returns anything in our download list. And if it does, then we're going to call that thing's increment. Okay, got it. So we're going to call that download info's increment download, whatever it's called. God, I should know what it is. Increment times downloaded. So tricky, right? And if it's not, if it returns null, if that method get download info returns null, then we'll add a new download info object, the list. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. It's a lot to unpack, but that's the strategy here. If I go down here, there was a thing from adhesive again. So I know what download info does, I know what music downloads is. Our task now is to implement this update downloads method that takes a list of titles, updates download list. For each of those titles, increments the download count. And if it's already there, if it's not already there, we'll add it to the end. So our plan is to loop through the titles in our parameter and call the method from part A, get download info. All right, I'm going to pause there. If you want to try it on your own, go ahead and try it. I know this is kind of a little bit complicated, but go ahead and try it on your own, and then I'll do the same. Let me copy part B in this Google Doc just so I have it. Select. So this is part B to fill in this method. Just going to copy and paste the whole header there. Okay, and I need this. Go ahead. If you want to try this on your own, part B, I'll pause the video now, and you can pause the video, and then we'll come back and we'll compare. Okay, so hopefully you tried it on your own. If you didn't, that's totally fine too. I'm not asking you to do this part. I was just using this as kind of like I wanted to give you a walkthrough of how I would approach one of these free response questions um, based on the strategy of read the question fully, understand the different classes and objects and parameters, the method that understand the task, what you're supposed to be writing, and what it's supposed to do, and implement. Think of a plan before you start writing any code. Think of a plan for how you're going to do it. So I think I've got a plan here for myself, right? I need some kind of for loop. Stop Google, thank you. I need a for loop. I just do a simple one, and I equals 0 of through this titles, right? Through this list of titles. For example, here, this is their example, right? These are the titles that were the parameter. So I'm going to have to go through this list of titles one by one. So while I is less than or equal to titles dot, now that's an array list itself, so dot size minus 1 I plus plus. Let me just make some room here. So what am I going to do with each title in the list, right? And if you want to make things easier in the for loop, you could even do you could set it up so it's like string t, and then in here you could call t is going to be titles dot get I, just to make things a little bit easier for ourselves, right? I don't have to keep calling titles dot get I, kind of like I did up here, download list dot get I. Let's just make it a little bit simpler for ourselves. So t is titles dot get I. It's the first title that we're looking at for each title. T equals titles dot get I, and for that title, I wanted to call the part A method get download info on that. Download info. Because that's going to return a download info object. That's going to return the download list. So, so I want to know if get download info screen. Now I'm just going to put in, it takes a title, right? I'm going to put in T for the first title. And this method is going to return the object in the list. So if it's not null, I can do that with the not operator, not equal to null. And what do I want to do? I want to I want to take that object, get download info T, copy and paste, advantage of using a computer. And I'm going to take that object, which is like, for example, Aqualon, right? If the title was Aqualon, get download info is going to return this object, a reference to this object in our download list. So get download info T is returning this object, and I want to call that object's, I'm never going to remember it, increment times downloaded. Let me do it. just gonna have to type it. Well, I won't. It's because I highlighted it somehow. Increment times downloaded. That's what I do. Dot increments times downloaded. Which is a method. I'm going to call that method and just increment the times it was downloaded. So like aqualun, where am I? Aqualun will go from 10 to 11, right? If I'm on this title in the list. Now, what if get download info doesn't return null, right? Then I want else. What do I want to do? Maybe I'll make this cleaner here. Else, we need to add a new download info. This gets tricky, right? We need to add, like lights wasn't on the list, so I need to add a new download info object to download list that has this as the title, and there's a constructor for that in the download info object. Download info string title. So I need to do again, it's okay if you're not really sure about this part. I think if you didn't get this part, you'd still get like pretty good credit on this if you just had kind of this stuff without the else here. Well, as long as you like added something, right? There's probably you probably get a point if you add something to the list. So what I want to do is I want to what was the list called? Download list. Download list. Not add. I want to add something to the list, right? What do I want to add? I want to add a new download info object. Right? A new download info object. So I'm just going to call its constructor on the title T. There. That's all I want to do. I think. And then this is the end of the for loop. This was something I saw elsewhere. Kind of nice to have. So, I mean, I just use the indentation to know that it's the end of the for loop. But so if you want to put that there, it's fine. It's up to you. And then here's another important thing. I think keep in mind this is a void method, so it's not going to return anything. So don't put any sort of return statement because they'll actually take a point off. If you do try to do a return for a void method like this, if you return anything, they will take a point off. So don't return anything. It's kind of important for this method because it's a void method. You will get a point if you try to return something for a void method. I think that's it. I think it seems like it's not that much code, but I think that's literally into account the case where we increment times downloaded, and we've added a new thing to the end of the list if it wasn't in there before. The key here was using the methods that we had from before from part A. Get download info was the part A method that returned the object from the list. Also key is knowing the name of the list, download list. We had to use that several times. This list. And you have to get those names using the constructor, using the increment times downloaded method. All of these things are key information, and it's why they actually repeat that information here so you know what is in a download info. What is in a download info object? There's a constructor, there's a get title, there's an increment times downloaded method. What's in music downloads? There's a download, something called download list, right? So this kind of summary is important. Like if I, instead of scrolling back up, I could have just looked at this box and like, oh, it's called increment times downloaded. That's how I increment a download info object. So that's my kind of suggestions. It's my advice for this sort of thing. This would be my entire code. So what in the exam itself, all you would have to do is copy this into the part B section, right? Or you could copy the whole thing. Actually, you need this whole 8-digit ID, everything at the top. For part A, like I would copy everything from here down to here and paste that into their portal. And this is how I'm going. I think that this is going to go. Next week, I'm not going to ask you guys to do anything because I know the exam's going to be on Friday. All I'm going to ask you to do is kind of do the checks, make sure you know your AP ID. I'll send you a checklist. There was some kind of checklist. There's like a demo. There's a link to an exam demo where you can just like make sure the portal works on your Chromebooks or whatever device you're going to use. And that's it. Let me know if you have any questions at all, please. I'm going to ask you to try another FRQ that was posted today, this afternoon. Good luck. Enjoy the nice weather. Don't stress out. Peace.